I've come to the XO stand in Düsseldorf because there's a new XO Defender in the range. Now this one you see here, emblazoned with the Motorboat Awards winner sticker, is the XO Defender 9. And that's a boat that we took across the Baltic from Finland to Sweden. Spent 5 days on board that boat, and it's a fantastic piece of equipment. It uses a very lofty central pilot house with huge one-piece windows at the sides and a walk-around design to give tremendous visibility. It handles an absolute treat. It's very easy to use, very easy to enjoy at the back end and at the front end. It's a superb adventure boat. So when the guys at XO said that they had a new Defender 8, a smaller version from that same product line, we were pretty keen to take a closer look. First thing to note is very clearly it uses a different approach to its deck layout. There's no walk around design here. This is a full beam pilot house they've used because of course they have slightly less space to work with. You step on at the aft end. The engine rig we have here is twin 200s. You can actually apparently rig this boat with twin 225s. Which is what we used on the XO Defender 9, and even then when it was a little heavyweight and it was boat number 1, we were still getting 45-46 knots out of that. So this is easily a 50 knot boat, this XO Defender 8, and apparently according to the guys who have done a little bit of testing on this already at the XO factory, it's an absolute beast of a sports boat. Really easy to throw around, really quick, really agile, and a great sea boat, which its bigger sibling certainly is. But you can also spec this with a single rig, either the 400 horsepower V10 or a 450R. And they seem to think that with a 400 V10 it would be absolutely in its element. In any case, in this aft deck, I suspect that they're going for a kind of Land Rover Defender vibe there, and they're certainly achieving that. But it does mean that the internal spaces of that pilot house do not integrate especially well with the seating areas of the external cockpit. Let's open that back up and have a look at this aft bench. Now this sits bang in the centre, so there's plenty of easy access via both swim platforms, one on either side. And it's positioned a good way aft, so in order to trim those engines right out, you simply fold that backrest down, and they can nestle neatly beneath this frame, get the props right up and out of the water. Let's take a look underneath the deck to see what we see down there. There we are. So this is pretty much, on boat number 1, access to the engineering spaces. We have the diesel heating there, the batteries down in the bilge there on their own little plate, and over there next to the diesel heating, which makes good sense, we got the little diesel tank which leads directly up to the fuel fillers on the port side there in their own neat little moulded recess, so you don't get any spillages inside the boat. It'd be nice to see some sort of tray there in evidence, so you could use it for a bit of storage, but as things stand, that's very much an engineering space. Let's close that back up. We do have some good storage beneath the seat there though, just a little cutaway. It's nice and big, but very quick access, so that's handy. If we step straight up onto these side decks and take a walk, well, they're very easy to use. They're not wide, but they're perfectly grippy with this kind of soft touch rubberized decking. And although there are no dedicated grab handles on this rooftop, there are plenty of easy mouldings to just lay your hand on to guide your way forward. And when you reach the bow space, that's pretty impressive. we look across to the Defender 9. Well, the theory is on the Defender 9, though it wasn't rigged that way when we used it, that you can entirely fill that space with cushions and use backrests that are around the periphery that are cushioned as well. So it's pretty much an identical solution here. It's easily big enough, I would say, for 6 people to nestle in and have a few beers on that foredeck. Very sociable. And actually, that's not even guesswork on my part, because when we went across the Baltic, we used that bow deck for exactly that, even though it didn't have any cushions, and it was perfectly spacious enough for 6 guys to sit and have a pint. It was a lot of fun. So beneath this deck, as you can see, it takes a couple of steps up, so it's relatively raised. There's a big hatch, and it's reasonable to assume that beneath that hatch we'll find a decent bit of storage. Up she comes, and yes, we do. Let me just grab hold of that. Yeah, we got the hatches there down to the bow thruster, but this is a lovely big space, properly lined with good drainage there. There are a couple of other features up at this bow space worth having a quick look at while we're here. Up in the forepeak, we've got a good size of anchor locker, albeit filled with fenders at the moment. There's plenty of space between those guardrails to step off at the bow, and we've also got little cutaways here, so you can run your lines from there instead of cluttering the place up when you come alongside and tie off. These cushions are very comfortable around the gunnel sides there. We also have some cup holders built into the gunnel tops, plus little netting spaces for extra bits of gear. We've also got the outlet for the black water tank here, again with its own little moulded recess to keep any mess out of harm's way. Now let's step back down into the forward part of that pilot house and have a look at what we see. Instead of forward facing seats you might expect in the Defender 9, we have a pair of really quite significant benches. I reckon you could easily fit 3 people on each of those, maybe even 4 if you've got some little people about, facing one another across this wide central companionway. So that takes full advantage of the full beam pilot house. There's also a fridge underneath the starboard moulding there, a pull-out fridge, and there's a bar, as you can see, just here along the side of that starboard bench. And the reason for that is that you can detach this port seat, pull it across that gap to span the gap, use these backrests as infills, and create a nice double bed right across the aft end of this pilot house. Yeah, it's a really decent size. I anticipated these kind of mouldings here on the side of the pilot house might get slightly in the way. They don't at all. There's good space above my head here, and if you look at my feet, there's good space there too beyond my jazzy socks. So there's a good 6 foot 6 inches of length here in this bed, decent width too, and it's actually very comfortable. It's not of course as practical as a permanent double bed, which the Defender 9 has in the forward part there, plus its own separate heads compartment, so that's a level up. But of course with the Defender 8 you've got less space to play with, so it's a decent kind of compromise here, and it certainly will appear a lot more decent, I think, once Yakko's worked his magic and just ironed out that mechanism to make it a little simpler, a little more straightforward, a little quicker to convert. Now I'm going to leave that in place, clamber over the top here and take a look at the helm position now. Now above our head we have a nice concertina sunroof. There's pretty good aperture there, so you can get plenty of natural light in. Headroom in here is not as good as on the Defender 9 because that has very elevated sides with those big one-piece windows that you can slide fore and aft, but we do nonetheless have pretty good visibility here all round, and it seems to me that they've tried pretty hard already with the ergonomics of this helm station. We have a little armrest, presumably, yeah, that comes up so you can keep your keys, various bits and bobs in there, and you can also rest your elbow on there and your hand falls very naturally on these twin throttles. We also have our trim tab controls just there on that ledge, which is with an easy reach of your fingers, that's no problem at all. And the diesel heating control there as well. Plus a really generous size of Simrad MFD on the main section of that dash. Aside from that, it's relatively simplistic. It really is. We just have a little bow thruster switch there and the windscreen wipers there, one for either side, because of course it's split down the middle. And that in itself is pretty good to see, because on a lot of boats you wouldn't tend to see a windscreen wiper lavished on the poor old co-pilot, exiled over here on the port side. But as I say, you get a seat of equal calibre. You can adjust the damping resistance to your weight, the sea conditions, and the level of comfort you want. You also get a nice sturdy foot brace down there, and a grab handle too, again leather lined, with a couple of cup holders down in there. There's a speaker and a vent there, so you can keep your toes nice and toasty with that diesel heating. And the windscreen wiper there. It's a comfortable position. You're not really that involved with the driving element of the day, because you're separated by that central companionway, and there's not a great deal of space here for a secondary MFD, though I guess you could use an iPad on this side to get involved in the navigation a little bit, stay involved in the passage, stay involved in the adventure. And if that adventure gets a little bit lively, a little bit lumpy, a little bit wet, you can of course cordon yourself off from the elements in this pilot house by sliding across the lower level of that partition and then closing that hinged section of screen. There we are. Although I'm walking around that boat looking at the various day boating features and overnighting features, comparing it to the Defender 9 and being slightly cruel because I know how good the Defender 9 is in that regard, the hull is proper XO Defender. As you can see, it uses this same rather lovely carbon fibre graphic to make that aluminium hull look a little sexier, a little funkier. It also uses a pair of these, which are kind of reminiscent of the commercial world of pilot boats and tugboats, integrated fenders for impact mitigation. And they're very coarse, very rough. They feel kind of like 60 grit sandpaper. Very rigid as well, and they come out almost at the same level as the edge of that enormous fat rubbing strake that wraps all the way around this boat, right from this fat, tough, rubberized nose cone here, all the way back to the aft end of that cockpit, at which point it continues at the lower level to wrap around these swim platforms and ensure that you keep yourself safe when you come in astern. Now this is built from heavy duty aluminium, and as you can see it uses a very fine entry, and this ought to be as soft riding as the Defender 9, I would have thought. And it's also ideal to use in the way that many Nordic boaters do, with this heavy duty aluminium keel, simply to run it up on a beach and step off at the bow. That's why so many of these boats tend to come with stern anchors. Now, considered in isolation, the XO Defender 8 seems to be a pretty impressive boat. If you were perhaps a visitor to the show, you didn't know what else XO was capable of, you'd look at this thing and think, yeah, sexy looking boat, robust aluminium build, clever Scandinavian design, plenty of power on the transom, the promise of lots of performance, also the promise of quality sea keeping. And having tested various other boats in the XO range, I can personally vouch for the fact that the sea keeping tends to be pretty top notch. The problem for the XO Defender 8 is the XO Defender 9, which beats it in pretty much every conceivable regard. And that's fine if there's 100,000 euros between the two, but there isn't. Now, I went and checked with the guys here on the XO stand to find out what the prices were all about. And in show format, with the 9 rigged with twin 225s and the 8 rigged with twin 200s, the 9 would cost you 252,000 euros and the 8 will cost you 216,000 euros. So about 36,000 euros between the two. Now, if you rig them with the same engine, a single 400 each, that comes down to 237,000 euros for the Defender 9, 205,000 euros for the Defender 8. So there's only really about 30,000 euros in it. And the Defender 9 gives you a proper dedicated cabin, a separate heads compartment and an aft end that is fully configurable, as well as a foredeck that is user-friendly and sociable. And by all means, if you want to consider the Defender 8, then do so. If you want a classical full beam pilot house boat, kind of a traditional Nordic commuter boat, take a look at this, take it for a test drive. I mean, chances are you'll be very impressed and you might even buy it. But I would urge you, if there's any chance that you can find 30,000 euros extra, then also test drive the Defender 9, because I think if you do so, you will end up buying that boat instead.